Today we're diving into something that should make every British citizen sit up and pay attention. A neo-Nazi working security at Buckingham Palace, a $100 million corruption scandal tearing through the Ukrainian government, Prince Andrew on his knees begging Jeffrey Epstein for help, Zelensky warning that Europe could be staring down a full-scale war in just 4 years, and a story of modern slavery happening right here in Britain that will make your blood run cold. This is the news the big networks won't touch with a 10-foot pole, and you're about to hear every single word of it. I walked away from a major media outlet because I saw how they twisted every story to fit whatever narrative suited them that day. I got tired of playing along. Now I work for myself, I answer to no one, and I tell you what actually matters. That's why I'm here, and that's why you should be too. And listen, if this kind of reporting matters to you, if you're tired of being fed sanitized garbage dressed up as news, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you really want to support independent voices who aren't beholden to corporate interests or political machines, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It means more than you know. It keeps this operation running, keeps me digging, and keeps the truth coming your way. So let's start with what the British press is finally slowly starting to acknowledge about Ukraine. And pay attention here because the shift is noticeable. Major outlets are now publishing stories about a massive energy sector investigation unfolding in Kyiv. We are talking about the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Energy, both submitting their resignations after accusations of corruption involving around $100 million. This isn't small potatoes. This is contractors linked to energy infrastructure reinforcement, financial flows running through offshore schemes, the whole dirty playbook, and here's where it gets interesting. Among the suspects are figures close to President Volodymyr Zelensky himself, former Deputy Prime Minister Oleksiy Chernyshov, businessman Timur Mendich, the Minister of Energy, Svitlana Hrinchuk, and Justice Minister Herman Halushenko both insist they'll defend their innocence, but Zelensky has already demanded their dismissal. This investigation, carried out by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, spanned 15 months and included around 1,000 hours of audio recordings. According to investigators, participants in this scheme allegedly received kickbacks from contractors and laundered the money through an office in Kyiv connected to the family of former deputy and current Russian Senator Andriy Derkach. Let that sink in for a second. The investigation is happening against a backdrop of escalating attacks on energy infrastructure and raises serious questions about just how deep the rot goes in Ukraine, even after anti-corruption reforms and recent protests defending the independence of these oversight bodies. This is raising eyebrows among international partners who are watching closely, concerned about the pace of reforms and whether Ukraine can meet European Union criteria. Even the BBC is writing about this openly now. And yes, the BBC has lost a tremendous amount of credibility, but they're still putting this out there. Now, our old friend, and I use that term loosely, Gergana Krasteva, writing in the Metro, also mentions Zelensky, but somehow she completely overlooks the corruption scandals. Instead, she's busy frightening British readers with a different narrative altogether. She writes that Volodymyr Zelensky has warned Russia is preparing to unleash a major war in Europe by 2029 or 2030, calling for increased pressure on the Kremlin. According to the Ukrainian president, Moscow is ramping up military production and shows no intention of stopping the conflict, and sanctions plus weapons deliveries haven't been enough to stop Putin. Against this backdrop, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiga traveled to London to meet with his British counterpart, and Russian forces continue their advance in eastern Ukraine, seizing towns in the Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kharkiv regions. European officials and experts consider the years 2027 to 2030 the most likely window for a possible Russian attack on NATO countries, and surprisingly, they name Moldova, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia as potential targets, though the maps they print in the papers show, well, I'm not even sure what they show. Either their geography is weak or they're presenting the whole picture of how Russia would supposedly move west. It's unclear. And going back to Gergana herself, if you look at her headlines, if they don't start with the word Putin, the day was apparently wasted. Now let's talk about something else dominating the British press right now. 20,000 emails from Jeffrey Epstein's archive have been published, and the timing is awfully convenient. perfectly positioned to distract attention from Ukraine. These emails reveal new details about Epstein's connections to Donald Trump and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Yes, that's what they're calling him now, the man formerly known as Prince Andrew. In correspondence from 2011, Andrew is literally begging Maxwell and Epstein to help him when a publication was preparing to release scandalous photographs with Virginia Giuffre, insisting he knew nothing about any allegations. And get this, Lord Peter Mandelson, who worked at the British Embassy in the United States, continued his contacts with Epstein all the way until 2016, advising him to avoid interviews with the BBC and to stay far away from Andrew, noting that without the prince, the scandal wouldn't have been nearly as explosive. These emails also show that in 2018, Epstein was allegedly advising Russian politicians on how to understand Trump, claiming he discussed this with Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, before Churkin's passing in 2017, and even offered Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov insights through him. But Trump, for now, remains somewhat on the sidelines of this story. Apparently, they're still a bit afraid to go after him too hard. Andrew, on the other hand, they've hung out to dry completely, along with plenty of others. Here's another story that'll shake you. Hakan, a Turkish migrant, has shared his account of more than a decade of modern slavery right here in the United Kingdom, where he was exploited by two separate groups of slaveholders. He arrived in the country on a tourist visa back in 2006, stayed after his daughter was born here, and his visa expired and ended up homeless. His first exploiter lured him in with promises of restaurant work and a fake work permit, then forced him to work 19-hour days without any pay for 4 entire years. Later, Hakan fell into the hands of another gang connected to the Connor family, where he was beaten, had 16 teeth pulled out, was forced to crawl naked through sewage systems to pull electrical cables for stealing electricity, and was even used as bait for training fighting dogs. Any attempts to escape were shut down with threats against his daughter and tracking his location through his phone. In 2022, he finally managed to escape and is now under the protection of the Salvation Army. Hakan decided to share his story in light of a storyline about modern slavery in the series Emerald, hoping to draw attention to a problem that still exists in Britain today. And before you think this is some rare, isolated incident, think again. This is happening, and it's happening more than anyone wants to admit. Now, stay with me because this next one is wild. An ITV investigation uncovered that 26-year-old Matthew Greville from Leicestershire, a former Buckingham Palace attendant who conducted tours for visitors, has ties to neo-Nazi groups and was attempting to create an Anglo-American alliance of white supremacists. Greville, operating under the alias John, worked with fascist organizations including Active Club England and Vanguard Britannica. This past summer, he was photographed in the United States with a group of far-right activists, including neo-Nazi Robert Rundo. When meeting with a journalist, he admitted to being an ethnocentrist, defending the interests of his people, and stated that the royal family is completely uninterested in preserving indigenous Europeans. Buckingham Palace and the Royal Collection Trust refused to comment on security matters at the palace or about specific individuals, though they noted the seriousness of such situations. Let that sit for a moment. A neo-Nazi giving tours at Buckingham Palace. If that doesn't raise questions about vetting procedures and security protocols, I don't know what does. And if this story gets buried or downplayed, you'll know exactly why. It's too embarrassing, too uncomfortable, and too revealing about what's been allowed to slide under the radar. The Financial Times is drawing attention today to the fact that the UK economy unexpectedly contracted by 0.1% in September, reducing GDP growth figures for the third quarter and underscoring just how fragile this economy is ahead of the budget announcement from Rachel Reeves, which will almost certainly include tax increases. GDP growth in the third quarter slowed to 0.1% compared to 0.3% in the previous period, the weakest performance since the end of 2023. The September drop is partly attributed to a cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover that led to a production halt. Business sentiment has also taken a hit due to Rachel Reeves' decision to raise payroll taxes by £25 billion in the budget, with companies and households now bracing for further tax hikes. On November 26th, we'll get the full picture from our Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and it'll become clear that all of this is supposedly being done to fill a budget deficit with a £30 billion hole. Traders have strengthened their bets on the Bank of England, cutting interest rates by a quarter point in December, with the probability now sitting at 80%. If you understand these numbers, this information is genuinely useful. For the rest of us, I'm trying to break it down in general terms, and the conclusion is simple: things are not getting easier for us, and honestly, if they just don't get worse, that might be the best we can hope for. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer attempted to instill confidence in Britain's business sector by holding a closed-door meeting with top executives, where he emphasised government stability and the importance of the business climate for economic growth. This is according to the Financial Times. The meeting took place against a backdrop of, quote, unwelcome leaks and uncertainty ahead of the November 26th budget, with an emphasis on the need for clarity on fiscal policy and reforms. Company leaders expressed a desire to reduce uncertainty and discussed practical solutions for the economy, including business tax reform and reducing electricity bills. However, the lobbying and volume of demands were more subdued compared to what we've seen in the past. A key element was the anticipation of the budget, which is supposed to eliminate the £30 billion deficit in the country's finances. And honestly, I was tempted to add that golden phrase to the previous segment, you know the one. No money, but hang in there. But let's move on to other financial matters. The London Congestion Charge will increase to £18 per day starting January 2nd of next year. That's a 20% jump. If you live in central London or you regularly drive through there, you need to know this. Also, electric vehicle owners will, for the first time in 23 years, I'm not sure why that specific number is mentioned in the paper, but they'll have to pay to enter the zone. The 100% discount for these so-called clean vehicles is being replaced with a new tiered system. Electric cars get a 25% discount, meaning £13.50 per day, and that's only with automatic payment. Electric vans and quadricycles get a 50% discount, £9 per day. And when you factor in rising costs and penalties under the ultra-low emission zone, the total, with discounts, will come to around £30.5 per day for older vehicles. The new rules will also affect residents, those living in central London. New applications after March 1st, 2027 can get a 90% discount, but only if they own a fully electric vehicle, not a hybrid. Meanwhile, low-income residents and those with a blue badge, meaning disabled individuals, will keep their discount until March 2030. This is projected to bring additional revenue to Transport for London and, according to Sadiq Khan's promises, at least impact traffic and air quality. The reaction from experts and drivers is divided as usual. Critics call these measures a step backward. Support is limited to certain groups advocating for the transition to clean transportation. Drop your thoughts in the comments about these price hikes. According to a poll by the Centre for London, nearly half of Londoners would choose public transport over cars if fares were reduced. A full 49% are ready to switch to the underground, and more than a third would choose public transport if it were less crowded, safer, and more reliable. The study also shows that 20% of respondents might switch to public transport due to rising road costs, like the ultra-low emission zone charges we just talked about. And citywide, efforts to maintain affordability continue, they say in the press. Bus and tram fares are frozen, and Transport for London fares remain below potential increases, all while measures for modernising and expanding the transport network push forward. Still, the price tag keeps climbing. Getting around London on public transport is expensive, and if you have to commute daily to work, especially into Zone 1, it's just not affordable for many people anymore, so they switch to cheap old cars. Next up, 7 areas across the UK are planning to deploy new police vans equipped with facial recognition technology, expanding the use of surveillance on people walking down the streets. Funding has been allocated by the Home Office for units in Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, Bedfordshire, Surrey, Sussex, Thames Valley and Hampshire. These cameras, mounted on vehicles, will compare faces against watch lists, including wanted individuals and those under court orders. Civil liberties advocates and anti-racism groups are criticizing this initiative due to past issues with accuracy and potential discrimination, while police argue the system has become more accurate and will be deployed transparently, with notification of deployment and prompt removal of false matches. As you know, in the past, this problem primarily affected black individuals, whom the system identified very inaccurately, and there were broader questions about where all these recordings go and why everyone on the street is being filmed indiscriminately. The company BR Promotions has been accused for the second time of illegally collecting money on the streets. I'm sure many of you have seen people standing on the streets here frequently asking for donations to some organization. Well, a London court fined this company and 2 directors £3,640 for repeat violations because they didn't have a licence to collect funds in the city centre near Cannon Street, London Bridge and Leadenhall Market. The company's founder, Ben Mills, and his partner, Daniel Widler, pleaded guilty to multiple episodes this year. They were previously charged for fundraising without permission in August 2024 and February 2025. This organization, operating as a community interest company, is not registered as a charity. It promises reform, but critics are demanding tougher penalties and stricter oversight of such activities. Indeed, information like this is appearing more frequently, that it's enough for someone to hang up a sign and start collecting. No one checks where the money goes. All this cash being collected just stays in the pockets of the people collecting it. As part of the investigation, there's also discussion about introducing higher fines for such illegal fundraising. Against this backdrop, the company plans to use video recordings and body-worn cameras to document cases of aggressive behavior by those collecting money. In Scotland, in Kirkcaldy, early in the morning on November 13th, 2 vehicles were set on fire on High Street and Leven Gardens, which police are treating as linked incidents. Reports of the fires came in around 3 in the morning. Firefighters arrived on scene and extinguished the flames. There were no injuries, but police have classified these incidents as deliberate arson and are conducting an investigation, calling on witnesses to report any information by calling 101. The only thing established so far is that the cars were set ablaze using Molotov cocktails. Before we go any further, let me remind you what we've covered so far today. We started with a neo-Nazi who worked security at Buckingham Palace and his ties to white supremacist groups. We talked about the $100 million corruption scandal shaking Ukraine's government, with figures close to Zelensky under investigation. We discussed Prince Andrew begging Epstein for help when scandal was closing in. We heard Zelensky's warning that Europe could face a major war by 2029, and we exposed the horrifying reality of modern slavery in the UK through Hakan's story. We looked at Britain's shrinking economy, skyrocketing congestion charges in London, the rollout of facial recognition vans, illegal street fundraising, and arson attacks in Scotland. Now, if these are the kinds of stories that matter to you, stories the mainstream outlets either bury or spin beyond recognition, then do something about it. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Share this video with people who need to know what's really happening in Britain. And listen, if you want to take it a step further, if you believe independent journalism that doesn't bow to corporate interests or political pressure deserves to survive, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It's not just about supporting me. It's about making sure voices like this, voices that won't be silenced or sanitized, can keep going. The truth shouldn't stay in the shadows, and your support makes that possible. Write in the comments which story shocked you the most today. Was it the neo-Nazi at the palace? The corruption in Ukraine? The modern slavery? Let me know what hit hardest. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay vigilant, stay informed, and don't let anyone tell you what to think. See you soon.